Every day before I go out and work on the car, I have this little ritual, I guess you might call it, of drinking some Red Bull, getting ready, thinking about the parts, doing an inventory, putting all my toolboxes and everything next to the back door so I'm ready to just lug all that stuff out. So today, since this might be the last day, hopefully, hope to God this is the last day, here's my tribute to Rorator, who seems to be my biggest fan from down under. So I'll go over today's supplies that I need to get put back on the car. Air reservoir, MAF, intake tubing, there's some more tubing, PCV, ignition coil, fuel filter, little bits and pieces. Looking forward to it. Maybe after this we'll have a bobby and celebrate. So hopefully today will be the last day and we'll get this done and celebrate. There you go, Rorator. That's your cookie. We are going to begin by installing the exhaust manifold first. You want your little divot side out, and that's because when we put the power steering back on, that might prevent putting the exhaust manifold back on. Alright, the end of this one is just a little bit rusted, so you can take your wire brush, and then you would put anti-seize either on there, or you could squeeze a little bit in the threads. It might be easier to squeeze some in the threads. Okay, now we are ready to install the header, or the exhaust manifold. This is an eBay header, and one tip is to make sure that your EGR fitting is out of the way. Washer with the thread sealant, just get it finger tight. Got all my exhaust manifold bolts in here. Make sure that those threads are good. If there's any grime on there, you want to clean that off. On a different area where the grime isn't, that's where you put all of your anti-seize, and you just kind of coat the threads a little bit. Make sure you get all the way up to the top of the travel, and you can just start threading those in like so. I don't think you can quite see that. Okay, well, let's just say you have to bend this nut to match that. Just about everyone I know that has gotten an eBay header has said they have had a lot of trouble matching the EGR pipe up with the header. Now I know why. It is a serious pain in the butt. This EGR pipe is really thick. It does not want to bend for much. And if you bend it here, you don't want to kink that bend, but you need, let's just say, less travel. You see how far away these two are? It doesn't look like it's off by much, but when this thing is super hard to bend, it's off by a lot. I figured out a way to make everyone's lives a lot easier. This pipe does not want to move at all, right? And the only place that it's connected is here and to the EGR pipe on the other side, but it's also clamped down right here. So get a 10mm wrench, undo that clamp, and you'll have a lot more room to play with. And then you should be able to hopefully freely bend that EGR pipe in the direction and the position that you need, and then go back and hammer that in or whatever, and just make sure not to kink it, but to hammer it in, and then use the clamp and put it back. There's really not much free play. I mean, we're talking less than a millimeter of free play with this pipe moving, let's say, side to side, you know, kind of thing while you're working on it. So even with this clamp up, there's still really not that much more free play, but there should be enough to the point where you can get that on there. It's still going to be tough. It's still going to require about 75 to 100 pounds of force pushing it in and pulling it up while you try and screw that on. So there's going to be force applied the entire time. So that's what you get when you pay for a $40 eBay header. Really crappy craftsmanship. Right now, so far, with all the matching and everything, I'm not impressed. It's this little unexpected stuff that really sets you back. That EGR pipe right there, it took me an hour in order to bend that tube to the right position and put that lock nut on. I use PV Blaster and anti-seize, and it's on now, and it's on good, and it's nice and tight. That was a pain in the butt. Right now I'm going to be replacing my ignition coil. Got a replacement, Wells C839, made in Mexico, 990300851 ref 34, whatever that means. Cap that goes on here and to the harness, so you're gonna have to unplug the harness. Oh, let's just try that. It's much easier. Okay, after you get the harness off, the easiest thing to do would be to get those two mounting bolts off the bracket and just take the whole bracket off. Those are two 10mm brackets. And then you can just use the 5.5mm wrench to get those little screws off. Easiest way. Okay, now that I have the two washers off, hopefully this thing will just pick right up. Yeah. And then you can lay it down on its side and then go after these little 5.5mm guys, and that will probably require your little adapter, 3/8" adapter, and a 5.5 socket. Then once you get it off the bracket, take your screwdriver on that clip, pry up, and then you can push out. Oh, it's got locking clips on the bottom too, so oops. So that's a little bit rusted. Don't really think that's such a big deal, but as long as I had the opportunity, and I'm doing a whole bunch of work, so why not? I figured I would just feel better if I had a brand new ignition coil. I'm pretty sure this is an original ignition coil. One goes like that. Why do I know that? Simply because this one was broken and the bottom one wasn't. So just put it back together like so. That bottom one clips, and then that clips, and then get out your screws. Get your anti-seize, and you can drop that in the washer like so. Just squeeze some of it in there, and then you can wipe off the bottom. Go back, get your 10mm. Okay, so once you got that done, obviously all you have left to do is connect your harness. For now, we'll just leave that dangling because we don't want any ignition whatsoever, as well as the distributor disconnected and the fuel rail disconnected. Right? Right. It might be different on some years, but if you have a cruise control diaphragm, your fuel filter will be right here, right below it. So you're going to have to remove this. Well, not technically remove that. You'll want to remove this bracket, which is held in by a screw here and one down there and one there. And then that whole assembly should just come off. It's hopefully disconnected. This whole entire thing should lift off and give you much better access to your fuel filter. And the fuel filter, that just looks like two 10mm bolts again. Just about everything on this car is 10mm. Alright, there's one there and one there, and you can just take those off. Now these are smaller washers than the bigger ones for the bracket for the cruise control, so that actually helps. This fuel line here that goes over to your bottom line, So let's just say that one there, right? And ooh, that's just gonna come right off in there. And there's a worm clamp around this bracket holding it in, so we're gonna have to get rid of that. And there's also a worm clamp on the bottom, so we're gonna have to take that off. This one's a plier lock clamp, so just get that done. Alright, for those of you who never taken off a plier lock clamp here, the nice thing about plier lock clamps is that they lock. And then as soon as you get it up past the flange, same concept as when we're dealing with anything else, you got to get it up past the flange. Everything has a flange, especially when dealing with fuel. Alright, so that one should be okay. Basically twist this whole entire line so that this worm clamp faces up. And that would be with a screwdriver on it. Let's just say, hold it something like this, and then you can try and pry off that a little bit at a time. And remember, there's going to be fuel. There might be fuel in there. It might have already leaked out, so as soon as you get this, remove it from the car. Trying to keep it level. There we go. Now you're going to put in your new fuel filter, F674795 Purelator. It looks different than the one that came off. It's got this little bit, but that's pretty nice. It tells you which way the flow is supposed to go. And you're going to install the bracket just like so. It does have a little hold down on the bottom, so you'll be just fine without the worm clamp. I'm not even sure why they put the worm clamp in there. I guess without the worm clamp it might have a tendency to rattle around a little bit, so they might have just put that in there to clamp this down. It's not a bad idea. We will go and reinstall the worm clamp. I got the header and intake. All I have to do is hook up the fuel lines and then the drive belts. I think I'll be ready to crank tomorrow. And I would have been able to crank today, but I'm going to lose about another hour. Because, once again, oh, there was some lightning over there. That big thick one, that's got lightning in it, and I need to get inside. Well, it happened again today. I lost an hour and a half of time today. Again. Should have zoomed all the way out. Alright, so we got our fuel bottom, fuel top, and then, as I was saying earlier, the little forms and the hoses help out a lot. So that I know that one just slips right onto the fuel pressure regulator. And this is a breather hose. This goes to my intake kit. It's got a little adapter that goes on the bottom of that, but I got that in the bag. So that's good. That's your breather hose that goes to your intake as well. This is your IAC connector. So we'll just put that back like so. And what? That's going to be your MAF connector, and that's going to be your IAT. So all this stuff will then go into the intake system. And then here's your main ignition lead. So with the ignition coil harness disconnected and your ignition lead, absolutely no way that the engine is going to get spark, as well as fuel, because the fuel injector harnesses electrical connectors are disconnected, so you will not get spark or fuel to the engine. So I think next we just have to make sure I loosely seated the alternator. Still missing bolts down at the bottom there, so I need to connect those. Once get that connected up, get the drive belts on, that should be it. But I am running out of daylight again. As you can see, there's another storm brewing, so time to work fast. Time to work fast. And no, that is not connected to my exhaust. I just put the exhaust header on here. That looks like it's good and tight, torqued down. I believe these torque specs are a little bit different than all the other specs. I believe this requires about 40 to 60 pounds of foot-pound torque for all those bolts and washers and everything. But as long as you hand tighten that real well, you should be good to go on that. I think that's the only other connector. Let's see, here's another additional connector down there. And where does that go? That one does not look like it goes very far. That probably connects into the O2 sensor. So before I tighten down my alternator belt, I'm going to put my belts on. So that's the next step, belts. I got both belts. One is Dayco, or I got both belts. Both are Dayco. This Dayco, which is 362K4, is a 1, 2, 3, 4 rib belt, and the 5050460 5PK1107 is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's a 5 rib. So you got a 4 rib and a 5 rib. All you have to do is check on your pulleys there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know that this one goes to your power steering AC pulley. This one will go to your crank pulley and alternator belt. Pretty easy to tell the difference between those two. Right? Right. Hey, made in the USA, I like that. Do this from the top, but it's a lot easier if you have the splash shield removed and you can reach your hand under there and then, you know, kind of grab it and wrap it around. So that's what I'm going to do just to save time, because it looks like it's going to rain again. And because there's still brown widows on the car, I'm making sure I wear gloves. I don't want those brown widows getting the best of me before I keel haul them with the wind of the highway at 70 miles an hour. Maybe that'll rip them loose. That's my hopes. I'll be like, oh, it's too fast for me. Let's go somewhere else. Okay, I have it down around the crank pulley and the AC pulley. So now it's time to get it up around this pulley right here. And it doesn't want to work with me. Putting it on the top here, put some top tension on there first, then we'll go at it from the bottom. You do need to remove your splash shield for this. That's on. And we can try and rotate that pulley around just a little bit to get that belt on. Alright, that belt's on. That's looking good. Okay, that belt's on. These two bolt holes, let's just say for the water pump on the other side of that, are the bolt holes that hold up the power steering. You gotta get your bolts on that. Okay, so this red tensioner, we're gonna have to give it or less tension.
Okay, so the more you loosen this bolt in the front, the more tension that you will have. You can kind of see the bolt hole there. Let's just say like that, right? There's two bolt holes, one on top, one on the bottom, and those two bolt holes have to match up. That's how you tighten your power steering pump. And once you get that in place, obviously you've got this big bolt there that goes all the way across, so that kind of holds everything in place. And then you tighten those two bolts down there, right? And that's when you use your adjustment, and that's for your belt tension or your belt deflection, and that will basically draw this whole assembly up, or your pulley up. And the same thing goes with the alternator. So that's how that's done. Now I'm in a hurry, so I'm not exactly going to show you how that's done, but that's the theory, and it's a pretty easy theory. Once you get in there, you'll figure it out. There's just 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts involved. That's it. Okay, U-joint, little extender, blah 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 blah. That would be nice to know how big those are, and that's not big enough, and that's too small, and Goldilocks just right. 12 millimeter for both of those. I got those two bolts down there. Took me about an hour. Again, it's the little things that just take forever. Because I did not want to raise the mount, I wanted to do it from the top. I had to do those bolts a little at a time. And let me tell you, you need a U-joint, and they're a pain in the butt. Now that I got that done, I am ready to retension my power steering belt and my alternator belt. It's like everything that you want to do, something is in the way. I want to go tighten this bolt for travel, right? But this long hose, that's in the way. It's like, why can't they make things just a little bit more modular? It's like spaghetti. Everything's just running in the way. Nothing's like bolted down along the sides and easy to follow order. Little boxes, modular, you know. Being a designer, seeing this kind of stuff really pisses me off. It is extremely inefficient. As you are tightening down this bolt with your ratchet, I put thread sealant all over that bolt. As you're traveling it back, this belt here will tension and tighten down, and I'm guessing the belt specs for the ones that goes around the 3 crank pulley, power steering, and AC, because that's 3 pulleys that it has to go around, so it's going to be your longer belt. That's going to be an 11 millimeter deflection. For the belt that only goes around the crank pulley and the alternator, that should be about a 10 millimeter deflection. So when you push it down, it shouldn't go more than 10 millimeters in travel. It should be really taut, but if you press it down with, I believe it's 22 foot-pounds of force, so basically put 22 pounds of force down on the belt, and if it travels more than 10 millimeters on that belt, that's out of spec, and 11 millimeters for that belt. That's close. I don't have a belt deflection tool. You can buy a belt deflection tool. Basically, you put it around your belt and it pushes the appropriate pounds, which in this case would be 22 foot-pounds, down on the belt as it kind of deflects up. Anyway, there's tools that you can get for that. Basically, I'm just guessing 22 pounds, and you want to do it right in the middle of the travel of the belt. I think that one's pretty good and tight. Next, we'll move on to the alternator belt. The alternator belt, that one's got a serious lack of tension on it, so we're gonna have to adjust this bracket. See, sometimes this nut gets stuck. This nut right here, sometimes that gets stuck, and that doesn't allow it to travel back and forth. See, that's really the key of this travel. You want to travel it as back as you can, and then you tighten down this bolt so that it doesn't travel back any farther, and that's when you screw it in from the back. This slide bolt here is 12 millimeter. Now that that bolt is tight, that goes across to a bracket over here, and that bracket is what holds the long thread bolt. And this is what you've used to fine-tune the tension. So now we'll take a ratchet, put it on here, and we will tighten the belt tension until it is approximately 10 millimeters of deflection, using 20 to 22 foot-pounds of force. Unfortunately, if you don't have a belt tension tool, that's what you're going to have to do. You're just going to have to approximate 20 pounds of force on the belt and 10 millimeters of travel. Let's just say in the morning, if you wake up, you crank the car and you start the car, and you get a whole bunch of squeal, really loud squeal noises, right? It's either going to be this one, which I believe is a 14 millimeter. Adjust that, tighten that. That will tighten this belt. Or if it's your back belt that's squealing, you would tighten that. I believe that's a 12 millimeter, 10 millimeter or 12 millimeter. And that should fix your squealing belts. Squealing belts are almost always an issue of belt tension. You've either got too much or too little. Belts will squeal if they are too tight as well. And the best time to change belts would be during the spring or the fall. You don't want to do it in summer or winter because the humidity will either loosen or tighten those come next season. So just a little tip for you. Right now I'm just hand tightening. Okay, the tightening sequence is a spiral again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then the middle. So inward spiral starting from 1 up at the top left, inward. And you only need about 8 to 9 pounds of force for this. I'll post the specs up for that right here, but these are not head bolts, these are valve cover gasket bolts.
I got a question.
Yep.
Why are you recording this?
Why shouldn't I?
Because it's just a curious question. You want to help other people that's having struggles too?
Pretty much.
They wouldn't help you, so why would you help them?
Who says they would?
If they would have helped
okay.
you.
Well, other people, right? I am other people. I'm helping somebody else that wouldn't help them, right?
True.
Okay. So I'm helping other people that don't know. How's that?
That was just a curious question. Alright then, that was just a curious question for today. You plan on driving this after done doing all this fixing?
Pretty close. Maybe tomorrow, if you're lucky.
You think you could fix? Like, are you almost finished fixing it?
Does it look almost finished?
Yeah.
Did you see what it was like when it was completely ripped apart?
Kind of ish, but that right there, if that right there was much bigger, it would have been looking like a Fast and the Furious.
Well, we'll see tomorrow. Got your PCV system in. Now we are ready to put the crank bolt on the pulley and manually crank it. You got your 21 millimeter. Pretty hard to see in there because it's starting to get dark, but I can still tell where it's at. It's going to take a while to crank this around by hand. Alright, I think we're just about ready for a crank. We are not going to have any distributor, no electrical harnesses hooked up. Got my electrical harness off, my fuel lines are hooked up, that's okay as long as the electrical harness is not hooked up. PCV, I do not have anything in my spark plug holes, so more than likely you'll see some, because I lubed that with oil, so you'll see some oil spurt out. Might not be a bad idea to put some rags on top of those holes, because the compression from that is going to shoot out. We're going to connect the battery, negative first, right? Put that on. Positive, it might spark a little. Watch out. That's on. Alright, now we're going to go turn the ignition. Now remember that your distributor harness is not hooked up, your ignition coil is not hooked up, and your fuel injectors are not hooked up. So you are not getting any spark or fuel. I'm putting rags over top of here because I filled my cylinders with oil, but those should pop up. My alarm system did not come on like I expected it to. So let's see if we can just crank this once.